stories written on a sleeve. Some stories take digging deep. Eyes wide open, words unspoken. Where are you going, darling? Where have you been? Stories to tell, emotions we felt, good and the bad, in the hands we've been dealt. I wanna know why you're the way you are.
Right. Hello, Internet, and hello, viewers. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to Comic Conway for letting us join the party. We are honored to be here. We are the last panel for today for Silverline's extravaganza on the virtual comic convention. I hope you've been enjoying the shows. Thank you to all the previous folks that have been on the panels. Curtis for hosting or moderating. You did a great job. You set the bar really high. And I hope we can continue to entertain and enlighten. We are Silverline, as I said. We are an independent comic book publisher. We are a genre-spanning independent publisher, and we have a great batch of stories. We've got little doses of sci-fi and a little bit of magic, and we've got all the great stories. And I always try to plug our website before I forget, because I'm very forgetful. silverlinecomics.com. Head over there after this so you can enjoy the show, but go over there, and almost all of our titles are there right now, except for the two newest, Trumps and Cat and Mouse #3. Those are currently being printed by Kablam Digital Printing. That is co-owned by Tommy Flormonti, if you were watching the previous panel, and those will be in folks' hands soon. We have a panel of experts here, and full disclosure, I don't have the bona fides. I would put myself in the almost nobody category, and so I'm surrounded by greatness. We've got
experts. I'm not one of them.
I'm surrounded by greatness. My name is Scott Wakefield, and I do have an upcoming title for Silverline. We're not going to talk about that right now, but my story is I got into comic books very late. So I've always liked writing. I got my degree in writing, and while I was doing that, comic books and Roland Mann really opened my eyes to the medium. I've always loved them. I've never been. I was never. Everybody has their story. They were reading them in the crib, in the hospital. You know, they just born, and they're reading comic books. But I did not immerse myself, and now I am, and I'm catching up. So I don't want to talk the whole time because these guys have lots to say, and we've got titles to cover. So the panel today is we've got 3 titles here. We're going to talk about Friar Rush, and I'm holding a Kickstarter exclusive edition. Ooh, I feel special. Twilight Grimm, another Kickstarter special edition. All right. And then I do not have something to show for Sniper and Rook, because that is on the way.
John's devastated.
There is an issue 1 Silverline version that is available at indieplanet.com. As I repeat, indieplanet.com.
Thank you. Yes, indieplanet.com. Look for Sniper and Rook, and you'll find it there.
Indieplanet.com.
I've yet to get my mitts on John's title there. I'll have to do that very soon. But John's going to explain all about that. And these guys are going to talk about their titles, and we are going to talk about the stories, the process that their individual processes when they were creating these stories and arting these stories. And I use that word arting loosely because I always cover penciling and inking and coloring. And I know writers are artists, but we have to have a differentiation there. So all the arting that goes into it. And then if you're watching and you're able to comment on the comment sections below the video, please do. If you have questions and they don't necessarily have to do with the individual title, go for it. Ask it. There's something that says we can't talk about processes or our imaginations and creative processes. So Friar Rush, we have with us today, we have Aaron Humphreys, yes,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And John Martin on my screen over there and over there. And then Twilight Grimm, we've got R.A. Jones on the phone. He Mr. Sub Low Tech, self-described. He's He's called us in, and he's on the phone. Thank you for joining us, Ari Jones, and
Glad to be here.
Rob Davis down in that corner for me, and we got Mike Belcher right there. Okay, and then for Sniper and Rook, we have John Medic III, and Ron Fortier is joining us too, just to throw in his, as I said, pearls of wisdom. He will-
I'm the original
we
con
swine?
crasher here, you know.
Hey, Ron.
Rules before swine. Are you saying we're all swine here?
I said nothing. Ron will join us, and he's going to chime in when he needs to.
Pithy comments.
Yeah. And John disappeared. I know he's had some connection issues. I'm just not seeing him. So let's start with Friar Rush and Aaron. We're going to start with you, if that's okay. Tell us about. Oh, wait a minute. I want to describe these stories before we get into the creation process. And as usual, if you want to read more about our titles, go to silverlinecomics.com. I like to point people there as often as possible. Friar Rush is from the legends of a 15th century story. And this is stories of the incarnation of the devil, or a devil that turned up in monasteries to tempt men and women of the cloth away from their calling and corrupt them. And so the question came up, what would happen if he came into the modern times? What would happen? And here he is in the modern times. You got some New Orleans street lamps. You got Friar Rush looking all sinister. And you have our hero there. So he's coming to the modern times. And unless I missed it, I think that's still a mystery how that happened. So why don't we go to Aaron? And how did you get... First of all, explain what you do with the story, and your inspiration, and how you came up with the characteristics and the layouts and the backgrounds and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. That might be a kind of a hard question because I actually completed and penciled that story over like 20 years ago. So I'm gonna have to try to remember what I was doing 20 years ago. I do remember some stuff. Okay, so this might be a jog of the memory, me going back in time. Okay, so if you want to cue up the wavy effects as we go back in time, I do know that when I was creating Friar Rush, the two strands of hair were supposed to be inverted horns, like devil horns. That was the idea behind that. It was something I never really said, but I thought, like, you have devil horns, you have these two, like the two long strands of hair, or like the horns. And I think I actually drew one panel with the hair flips up. It's what it's actually supposed to be. So it's basically like a devil who's like hiding his horns in his hair. And then of course I wanted to make him really gaunt and sort of like, creepy looking and stuff. For the other ones, I remember just drawing. I was very stylized back then. My art's still pretty stylized, but back then it was really stylized. I was just trying to make them more unique looking. So I think it was the reporter. I think his name's Jake. Not know me that the role was going to come on. Wrong. I tried to just give him an interesting coat. Try to just make the characters look a little more visually interesting than just like a regular trench coat. I remember that was kind of my idea when designing and drawing them. And I think I was actually kind of pushing a little bit manga. There's like speed lines and stuff, so little stuff I was in there. I even know in one issue, I think it's the second issue, I actually drew. I don't know if you guys remember the old cars, the Plymouth Prowlers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I drew one of those into the comic, like my version of it in the second issue. So that'll be the second issue. Okay. So you'll see that. So the stuff like that. It's funny going back looking. I do remember some of the stuff I did here and there, but I think I just tried to make it more stylized. I think that was my main goal with it.
You've done a really cool job. You've got some pretty expressive characters.
Yeah.
You say the manga Facebook sessions are pretty.
Yeah. And over time, 20 years later, I still have that. Like if you look at this comic book at Goblins ID, you can still see that. It's been toned down and more like, but it's still there. I mean, obviously the fingerprints of my artwork are still there. So yeah.
And your attempts to make Friar Rush sinister, successful. He's not a guy I'd maybe just invite out for coffee.
Yeah, that's my hoping, is that he looks like, but he's actually really sinister with the big grin and the teeth. Yeah.
Well done. Well done. And I forgot to give some of your credentials here, and I will allow you to talk too. I want you guys to talk about yourselves a bit. So, yeah, you are self-described lover of cartoons and action figures from youth, and X-Men was what got you into comic books.
Yes, that was my first big jump into comics, X-Men, and then I think followed shortly by like Appleseed, which is Matsumi Shiro's Appleseed, which is a manga. Which I met one of my best friends over. In school, he found that we liked the same comic, and then we're still friends to this day. But yeah, that's some of my influences going into comics and stuff. And for some odd reason, now I lost train of thought. What was like I was thinking of stuff, and then all of a sudden, like, I'm sorry.
And then you just kept drawing. Sixth grade.
I just kept drawing. Yeah.
In elementary school, you kept drawing, and we are here today. And you're just all over the place with in a good way. You're doing
right. I'm doing a comic called Goblins, which is posted on Webtoons, and I sell through my store. And I've done kids books, and even before that, I think I've made 1, 2, 3, 5 other comic books that were published just by myself. So I've been drawing this stuff for years and years and years. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Like I said, years and years and years. You guys have lots of cool experience. I'm going to move over to John here.
Cool.
We're going to keep talking about, we might come back to Friar Rush. I want to give everybody equal time. John, you, I have on my list, correct me if I'm wrong, you inked Friar Rush, yes?
Yes, I did.
And what was special about it? I know every book has a little different feel to it. Anything that you did special for this one that's worth noting?
Well, it's my first. Well, Friar Rush has ended up being my first full 20-page book I've inked, and also is one of the first books that I have a published cover on. So it kind of fit 2 categories there. Also, the first one that I've actually, that I got asked to do a job on too, and it was like, hey, yeah, there'll be money in the pipeline.
That's always nice.
I was like, all right, sweet. And like I said in the last stream, it kind of went, it was people that had been critiquing me and all, in Roland's ear, Dean Zachary, Mitch Faust, and Roland looked over my inks and was like, hey, you want to give this a shot? And I actually get my inks. You can actually look from page 1 to page 24, and you can see the improvement in my inks throughout just in that book.
That's how it works.
Yeah. I don't have the page. Let's see, 20. Right towards the end of the book, you got an awesome battle with this dragon monster thing. So
yeah, that's page 20. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. I love that. I love it. That's. I think that might be my favorite page.
It's mine too.
I got a question. I got a question for you, because this is a question I ask inkers. Do you ink the pages starting with page 1 and go through 24, or do you jump around in the book?
I believe it or not, I kind of went at it, and Roland says to this day that he told me to start at page 4. He did not tell me that. I started at page 1. I started at page 1, and heck, I'm working on issue 2, and I'm still going straight through, and I'm like
So you're starting at page 1 and working your way to page through 24, the last page, right?
Yeah.
I know inkers and pencilers that jump around in the book, and that drives me crazy because how do you know where you are in the book? How do you know how you're going to meet the deadline if you're not doing it page 1, finish that page, go to the next one? Plus, if you're jumping around picking your favorite pages to do first, what does that leave when you get to the end of the book? Your least favorite, the ones you're going to have to work the hardest to get done. Why are you doing that to yourself? Start on the first page, work your way through, and then you develop as you go. So hopefully when you get to those tough pages, you've got it down. So Yeah,
Oh,
that's
think
what I
that was-
wondered. I wanted to ask that question because I'm curious how many people do it that way from
Wasn't
page
it-
one all the way
yeah.
Rob,
through.
I have a similar story about a letterer. Rob, when I was writing the Protectors superhero series for Malibu, I was called up one afternoon. They were lettered by a wonderful letterer named Clem Robbins.
Yes,
And,
he's great.
And Clem called me in the middle of the afternoon one day, and he was in the process of lettering the current issue of the Protectors, and so we were having a conversation while he was lettering, and my first sense that he did that, just started on page one and worked forward, was when all of a sudden in the middle of the conversation he lets out an expletive. It says, "Oh my God, you killed him!" There comes the last panel. It shows one of the heroes lying there dead. and Clint didn't know that until he actually got to that sequence in it. So it took him by surprise. You killed him.
Certainly
Well,
keeps the
personally,
the
I
book-
think that's the professional way to do it: is start at page one and work your way through. But there are guys that do it. Use your own method. But if you're doing it any other way, you're setting yourself up to. If you're picking out your favorites to do first, I would do it just the opposite. I pick the hard ones to do first.
Yeah, I found it's a little bit of my, I guess you can say it's my OCD
Yeah.
when I go into it, because I'm
Mine
just
too,
like,
probably.
I don't care how hard the page is. I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna knock it out.
Perfect.
You know,
That's-
and
yeah, keep that. That's the way to do
Yeah.
it in my mind. I mean, but I'm
because then I
I'm an
get the
old
fun.
fart.
Like for example, when I got to page 20 on that first issue, after I had inked some of those pages, with all the straight line building work and all the foliage, the boring stuff. We get to this page and it's popping up, and I'm like, I kind of like, and I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool page. I was going through it, and I was like, this is turning out to be one of my favorite pages.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be organized enough if I did not go
Yeah.
chronologically.
Well,
I
that's
forget.
it exactly. You don't know how far along you are if you're
Right.
jumping around inside the book. Have I done 6 pages? Have I done 12? Where am I?
Right,
But
right.
if you're on page 6 and you started at 1, okay, I still got a third of the book to 2/3 of the book to do yet. So you can pace yourself to get the book done on time.
Yeah.
How else are you going to meet a deadline? But
Wasn't it the theory about jumping around is supposed to be the idea, like you're supposed to warm up? Like you're supposed to do the best. There was some theory somebody said, like, by the time you get to the good page, you're warmed up or whatever, or you've got the inking down. Wasn't that
Well,
what
no,
Roland
Roland.
said?
That's the reason why Roland says start like page 4 to page 5
Okay.
is that so you can get used to. So the first few pages aren't your first inks on this artist.
okay, yeah,
It's-
there's some merit to that thing.
Yeah.
I
And-
get it.
That's what I thought the theory was.
Don't
Remember him
go-
saying that.
You know,
you can't do
there's
that,
a wonderful story. There's a wonderful story from the Golden Age where an artist who had suffered, I think, a bit of a breakdown, perhaps, or whatever, and so had been out of the business for a while, and then was trying to come back. And so someone, it may have been Joe Simon, but don't quote me on that, who hired him to come and work in his art studio. And so the first day he comes back to work to try to draw a comic book. He has a great time. He's telling all the other guys, regaling them with stories of the good old days and everything. They're all having a good time. But Joe noticed at the end of the day, the guy had not actually drawn anything. And a day or two went by, and he still had never actually drawn anything. And so Joe approached him and said, "What's the problem here? You're supposed to be drawing. You've got your script here and everything." And the guy just admitted to him that he was so nervous and so afraid that he was having what we call it writer's block, and the writer's an artist's block, I guess you'd call it. He just staring at that page, that blank piece of paper, was intimidating him so much that he could not draw. And Joe just said, "Well, is that all it is? Just a blank page?" "Yeah." So Joe just reached down, grabbed a pencil, and did a little squiggle on the page and said, "Okay, it's not empty anymore. Start drawing." And he was able to do so. And for a time, though, every morning, Joe would get him started with some little bit of sketching or whatever, just so he wouldn't be staring at that blank sheet of paper. And then eventually, of course, he was back in the groove and could do it himself. But that's what it took to get him going.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Having
Yeah.
the emptiness, the daunting task ahead of you is stifling. So, or
That's why when I finish inking a page, I go through a process. When I finish inking a page, this is late in the day usually, then I will pull the next sheet out. I'll set up all the blue lines, and then I will at least do a real rough breakdown of the next page. Set that aside so when I come back the next day, I don't have to start fresh. It's right there. I've got the basics already in. The panel borders are in. I'm ready to roll.
Right.
I don't have to worry about that blank white page looking at me. Of course, now when I get to the end of a project and I've got a space between this one and the next one, then I got a problem. I got a blank sheet of paper, but I can usually get past that. Again, I just start with a pencil and start, just doodling. If I'm not feeling it, if I get that pencil moving, eventually something will come. I guess that's what writers do too. You just peck at the typewriter keyboard and get something out just to get it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna, Mr. Viking Prince. I didn't let you give us some of your bio. You worked we got Maw Productions and Hey Cat Comics.
I did a little bit of work. I did some inking for Maw. I haven't really mentioned that a whole lot because it hasn't come out. It just kind of I totally forgot that's still there. And the same thing with Hey Cat. I inked a cover for Larry, has been a cool guy, and it hasn't come out, so I haven't really mentioned that because the work's not there. I can't believe I still have that on there. I gotta fix that.
It's work.
Yeah, it's work, but
promote it ahead of time. Can't hurt.
Right.
So far, right now, I'm promoting some of it a few years ahead of time.
It'll happen.
Hey, I want to ask John and Rob a question talking about inking. And obviously, I know Rob is old school, uses pencil and pen and brush. And I'm assuming that's what John's using as well. I'm kind of curious what their thought is, because obviously a lot of this is now becoming digital. There are a lot of great software programs on the computer, and especially inking, I think a lot of guys are going to digital inking. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, I'll let Rob go first because he's got the tenure.
I've got tenure, yeah.
I'm only a couple
You're
years
older,
You
Rob.
can get tenure in inking.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, the difficulty I have is I'm used to having a sheet of paper like this in front of me. And when I'm drawing on it, I turn it.
Yeah.
And, and that's easy to do with a piece of paper in my hand. It's tougher to do with a monitor. I don't have one of those Wacom tablet. They've got these big monitors now that you can do it right on the monitor. Huge thing. But those are pretty expensive. Plus, I've been doing it this way for so long. I'd have to reteach myself how to do it with the big tablet. So it's mostly just habit and what I'm most comfortable with. And now, as far as thinking, that's not the way you do comic books. Heck, do it any way you can. People ask me what tools to use. I say whatever puts black ink on the page or on the monitor. I use Q-tips. I've used sticks that I've cut into points. Yeah, whatever you want that'll put the black on the page. That's what you use. So it's just another tool. So the one drawback though is you do it on the computer, you don't have original art to sell.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest drawback. Yeah.
I'm just seeing that as time goes by, we're seeing a lot less like lettering, for example. Let's get to that.
Yeah, I
think
don't do it by hand anymore.
there we go. So that's
Yeah.
the point I'm getting at. And Rob and I have a few friends that we know. Guy Davis, who lives here in Colorado, does most of his work on a tablet now.
Mhm.
So, there's a shift coming, like I said,
Yeah.
obviously with lettering, it's pretty well much there. It'll be curious to see what happens in the next, 5-10 years with things like inking and even actual original drawing.
Oh, yeah,
I'll probably
coloring
go-
is again almost always done on computers now.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah, the palette's so huge on programs now. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say this in the and when it comes to the difference in between digital and traditional inking, unless you unless you probably the best inkers I've seen inking digitally are some of the top inkers inking traditionally that actually went through and they found a way to play with the settings to make it mimic
Exactly.
traditional inking.
Yeah.
The problem
there still
is
has to be some artistic talent behind that computer. I mean, I couldn't go in there and digitally ink something and have it look very good, I'm sure.
the problem I mean the problem there is the fact a lot of people don't know what it's the nuances of inking traditionally because they haven't done it. They've just done it digitally. And there's a certain life that you give to a page when you ink it traditionally, because you've got those little imperfections and things like that. Even with a ruler, you'll have an imperfection.
Yeah, it's a lot easier.
I feel that way about writing, actually. I still write. My first draft is still done on paper with pen, and part of the reason for that, besides just the way I've always done it, is that it makes me feel more connected to the work, to what I'm writing. It feels more like the words are flowing out of me and down onto the page. That's a feeling that you don't get that by just typing those into your computer or typewriter or whatever.
Right. And there's that line correction setting that they have in a lot of programs now, where you can draw a line and you see it come out kind of shaky, but it straightens it up for you.
Yeah.
And that takes away some of that life in that line. And sometimes if it's not set right, you take away a lot of even some of that variance in that line weight that you're trying to throw down too, which is so much easier to. In my opinion, it's so much easier to throw down with a brush than it is on a tablet.
Yeah. Gentlemen.
Yeah, which is pressure rather than, with a brush, it's how you hold the brush. And of course, it is with the tablet too, but it's usually pressure that changes as you're drawing something. Some of them
have you guys ever talked to an aspiring artist and got the sense that they at least kind of unconsciously believed that it was the type of pen or pencil you used that made you a good artist or not?
Yeah.
So that if you would just tell them the right pencil or pen to use, then they too would be a good artist.
The magic feather, right? For to apply. Gentlemen, we got to talk about
big black areas.
That's right.
I want to
those blacks.
move on to Twilight Grimm.
All right.
So we've got three gentlemen here. We've got Ari Jones there in the middle. We got Rob Davis in the middle for me, Ari Jones on the phone, and Mike Belcher. We haven't heard from you, Mike. Let me get. You've been quiet. So
I like to listen.
Twilight Grimm. Here we got Twilight Grimm here. We got a city bisected by a wall. And one side of the wall, we've got the upper middle class, respectable people. And then on the other side, a depraved sector called the Blood Zone. There's the poor and the homeless, the physically disformed and so forth. And then the hopeless. I like this line. I'm stealing this from our website. Hopeless and helpless. I like it. And there dwell the vampires. The vampires are allowed to do as they please on that side. And they have run rampant, except now there is an individual named Twilight Grimm who is going to mete out justice of some form or another. And Mike, I know you like to listen. You are the letterer for this. What were your thoughts on this story? And tell us what you wanted to happen with the letters. And I know that's a broad statement for almost every comic book you letter in. But is there anything special you wanted to do, placement and style wise, with Twilight Grimm?
I certainly didn't want to cover up great storytelling.
Yes.
Which Rob definitely did with this. I think that
I try to leave
he did
room.
an excellent job. Huh?
I try to leave room.
Yeah.
You left plenty of room, definitely. But you did a wonderful job. And I thought the story by Mr. Jones was great. I thought it was a nice, interesting play on vampires and class structure. But as far as the lettering goes, I kind of approach it the same way I always do. I just don't want to mess with what's there. I want to make sure that you're kind of getting the storytelling and it's very clear, and both by the actual the words along with the artwork. It's like I said in our previous panel. If you notice my work, I did my job wrong. My hope is by the end of it, you got everything you need. I kind of see myself as the glue between the writing and the art, and trying to connect the audience. But as far as that goes, I make sure that everything's nice and clear and nice and clean, and I get out of the way when I need to.
That's the best lettering.
Yeah, it's a great job. Because you're right. Because any part of a story, whether it's motion picture or to a novel, if there's something that's jarring that pulls the reader or viewer away, that messes everything up. You don't want them to leave the fantasy world, the world that they're in. And lettering is often overlooked because of good letterers like you.
And lettering is itself an art form as well. And
absolutely.
And the good, the letterer, the fan doesn't see this part of it so much, where the writer depends on the letterer, not just to put his words down on the page, but to put them down the way he wants them to be put down, and to help him achieve certain effects with that lettering by making it larger or distinctive in some way, so that it looks different from other word balloons or whatever, and so forth. And so it is as collaborative with the writer as it is between the writer and the penciler in some ways, and you can tell just at a glance that Mike, of course, has done a terrific job.
Well, I have to agree with Scott's statement earlier. Okay, it's about the elements of the whole, and you don't want anything that's going to jar you out of that. And I think lettering, again, I think we all agree, lettering is that one element that the average fan won't appreciate. And one of the examples I like to give to that, another version of an element that should be there but not be, obtrusive, is when you go to a film and you see a good film and there's a music score in the background. Well, the music score is going to help enhance emotions for this scene or that scene or whatever, but it has to be subtle. You can't get jarred out of a scene with a bombastic orchestral motif that doesn't fit what's happening in the scene. And honestly, all right, I'm a firm believer, and this has taken me years of my own career writing, comics over the years, to slowly begin to appreciate that connection that lettering brings. It does tie the art and the story together beautifully, and when it's done properly, it is what makes the comic book.
Absolutely,
yeah. I got a cool page here with some great examples. You've got. I mean, he's obviously shouting here. That's some shouting. But you've got some great examples of the overlap, and then dialogue that makes sense. I hate getting to a page and not knowing, do I go this or do I go this way?
That's what good letterists do.
That's a great example. You mentioned one instance there. It's on page 12 of issue 1, where Twilight Grimm is standing on the steps of the church holding a cross up and yelling "Sanctuary," and that was largely inspired by a scene in the wonderful motion picture version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh yes,
That starred
Nice.
Charles Lawton
Mhm.
and Maureen O'Hara when Quasimodo rescues Esmeralda from a mob and carries her up to the walls of the Notre Dame Cathedral and just stands there holding her, shouting down at the crowd, "Sanctuary, sanctuary!" and yeah, Rob with his art and
Rob
Mike
showing
with
some
lettering
visuals.
helped
That's cool.
me recreate that scene just the way I wanted it.
Love it.
I tell you a horror story about lettering gone awry. This goes back to when I had the real pleasure and the fun of working on Alex Ross's first comic work, which was his illustrating a 5-issue miniseries that I had written for Terminator called Burning Earth. And I was not aware of the situation that, Alex was painting pictures, which was giving the people at the, the production comic company fits because they didn't know how they were going to letter it. This was watercolors. This was, we can't letter on the page. So the solution that the letterers came up with is they put a plastic overlay over each page, right?
Yeah.
And then actually lettered the plastic. Okay, well, all well and good until issue number 5, when somehow in shipping to the presses, 2 of those overlays got swapped around.
Oh.
Okay, so I get my comp copies, and as I do at most of my books when they come in, I sit down and read it through, and get to this middle section, and I got word balloons going to the ceiling, but not to the characters. They make no sense, and that's when I looked at the other. Oh Lord, they swapped them around. And so I raised the red flag real quick. I'm sure Mr. Ross wasn't too happy with that situation either. And ultimately, when now released the trade paperback and put them all together, they corrected those pages. So yeah, lettering is vital. It is totally vital.
Hey Ron, I remember buying that book, or Terminator Burning Earth 2, off of the racks. That was my first introduction to that issue. So I remember buying it off the racks at 7-Eleven. Small world. Pleasure to meet you.
That's so cool.
Same here, John. Thank you. All right.
I mentioned the great letter of Clem Robbins earlier. Another example of the relationship he and I had, and it was a mini-series I'd written with the classic old legendary character Sinbad. And there was a sequence where some sort of monstrous creature Sinbad managed to topple him off a cliff, and he fell to his death. And as this monster falls to his death, he's kind of growling / screaming as he falls. And so the kind of sound effect I had written was simply "rah," which I spelled RRRAAA. and in the margins, Clem wrote, "Note the clever way R.A. inserted his own name into the script."
Good. So, R.A., can you give us a quick, your 15-second, what is Twilight Grimm, and then what's your inspiration for it?
Certainly. Well, again, one of the most favorite monsters continuously is the vampire.
Yes.
Perhaps because he's the most humanistic of all the monsters. And a lot of people don't realize his modern day origins at least go back as far as that same wonderful brainstorming session that led to Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein. And of course, the template for the vampire is and always will be Bram Stoker's wonderful novel Dracula.
Yeah.
So the vampire is a fascinating character. One of those behind-the-scene things, when Roland Mann first approached me about writing something for Silverline, I pitched 3 separate proposals, brief proposals at him. One was for a science fiction story, one was for a sword and sorcery story, and the third was Twilight Grimm. And he sent these 3 pitches on to Rob to see which one he thought he might be interested, if any, he'd be interested in illustrating. And thank goodness he picked Twilight Grimm, which was my favorite of the 3. And part of the inspirations, obviously, again, everyone loves a good vampire story, but part of my inspiration came actually from my love of the Old West. It was a pretty common thing in towns of the Old West for towns to sort of be split. Sometimes the dividing line was a street. Sometimes it was the railroad track. If the railroad ran through town, and I assume that's where the term right side of the track and wrong side of the track came from. And on one side of that street or that railroad, again, you'd have your respectable part of town, respectable citizens and businesses and so forth. On the other side of that line, that's where you had the houses of prostitution, the opium dens, the gambling parlors, and so forth. And as long as those people and their activities remained on that side of the line, the other side more or less pretended it didn't exist and left them to be, unless it spilled over. And even in modern times, I know as recently as like the 1980s in modern day Boston, had an area of town that they called the combat zone. And a lot of people watching and listening to this have probably heard of areas referred to as like red light districts and so forth. So I took that and applied it to a modern day setting where, as you mentioned, we have a city called Hallowed Heights, where at one point, 20 years ago or so, there was an actual outright war between the human beings and the vampires, and an uneasy truce was reached whereby they decided to build a wall through part of the city. And as long as the vampires stay on their side of the wall, the good, decent, respectable folk on the other side of the wall more or less pretend that what goes on there doesn't really go on there. And the vampires are pretty much, they kind of rule over it the way a crime family might, to use another analogy there. And that's the setup. And about the only thing that stands between the vampires and the human beings who also live in that part of town, which I call the blood zone. The only thing standing between them is a young man named Twilight Grimm.
Very cool. Thank you, sir. I love the story. I love the premise. It's I loved reading it, and the art is fantastic. Rob, what's been your inspiration for the art, and what were you going for?
Well, whenever I get a new series like this, I used to, when we first started this, RA sent out a description of each of the characters. So what I will do then is take those descriptions and I'll do sketches of them. And these are some of them here. And we'll go through and you'll note this is Twilight Grimm as I originally conceived him. But then later on, R.A. Jones said something about, well, when you're drawing him, think of a really good-looking rock and roller like
John Medic.
Well,
John Medic, yeah.
Not that. Jim Morrison was the one he used to describe what he was looking for. So I went, okay, well, I'll just put Jim Morrison's head on this costume that I've drawn. So I went to the internet and I pulled down some pictures of Jim Morrison, and that's the basis for what Twilight Grimm looks like himself. Now the rest of them are from the descriptions that RA gave, and they're that he described the type of character they were. So I would design a look and a feel for them. And then I did up a sketch like this, so that later on when I'm actually drawing the book, I can make reference back to these so the characters will remain consistent throughout. Now they will change some as the book goes along, because I will get more and more comfortable with how to draw them, and they will change a little bit in their look because of that. But it'll be a gradual change of some sort. But that's my quote unquote inspiration for those. And then of course, as you go through the story, you have to figure out, okay, well, this particular scene is very more realistic. So I'm going to be very careful about how I draw the details in this, make it very realistic. But other times it's kind of bombastic and a little overblown, so you get a little more cartoony. It's knowing how to play all the grammar in comics is up to the style that you use, and that storytelling, angles of the camera and such, to give you the feeling for the particular scene. And this brings to mind a thought I had when we were talking about lettering earlier. It's interesting that the comparison between a composer doing the soundtrack for a movie and the letterer. So it's interesting. I'll now be thinking from now on that the letterer is composing the emotional center of the scene along with the images. So he's kind of the music composer of the piece here. So he could kind of set the pace. So yeah, that's something I hadn't thought of before, but that's a very apt
You know something else too with the artwork. Now I didn't do it here. Rob and I, thank goodness, have collaborated on many projects for better than 30 years now. So I don't know. I don't remember if I've ever done this with him before, but occasionally, especially back in the old pen and paper days and mailing everything to everybody, I would occasionally, when I would create a new book or just a new character, even though I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination, other than a writer artist, I would actually occasionally sometimes draw character sketches myself that I would include with the scripts, et cetera, to the artist, not intending for them to slavishly follow it, but because I felt like that would give them an even better idea of what look I was wanting, what I was trying to go for. The old, picture worth 1,000 words kind of an idea, that my sketch, crude as it might be, along with my written description, I would give them of characters or settings or whatever, would be just an added benefit to the artist then, to give him even, so he wouldn't have to try to imagine what it was I was trying to get him to draw.
Yeah, I don't think we had ever done that before. I don't recall you ever sending any sketches like that. But,
you guys are on the same wavelength from working so long together.
Well, we worked for a long time on a book called Scimitar for I guess it was Eternity, which was a subset of Malibu at the time, and we would have sometimes hour-long conversations on the phone, or he would send. And back then we were, this particular book is done full script.
Yeah. And
the reason for that is when RA came up with this idea, he goes, "Well, Rob, do you want to try and do it like we did with Scimitar back in the day, where we did it quote unquote Marvel style, where he would break down the story into beats, page beats, and then I would come in and actually tell the story, and some sections I would stretch it a little bit, others I would compact it. But because we hadn't worked together for a while, I went, no, I want full script on this, so that the RA's beats get transferred. Right. We hadn't worked together in a number of years, so I didn't feel that we necessarily had that. But I really like the way we're working on this now. This is working very well for me.
That's really good.
But that's the difference between back then and now, is that we work more.
We got 5 minutes left, and I don't want to leave John out.
Yeah, let's.
We got Sniper and Rook.
An hour. Sorry.
Oh my God, I love listening to you guys. Though,
Yeah.
Rob, what you were talking about with the lettering and the soundtrack. Oh my God, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's the soundtrack
one of the things.
Of the comic.
One of the things that would kill a book is horrible lettering.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is or how wonderfully written it is. Google this sometime. You can find it up on YouTube. It's a scene from Return of the Jedi, and they changed the soundtrack. And it's like, why soundtrack matters.
Yes.
And so, if you remember Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader is walking off the Imperial shuttle, and there's the Imperial guy there, all like terrified. But they changed it to Spandau Ballet's True. So it's like, da, 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 da. So it's like Vader's approaching them and they're in love. And it's just like, oh my God. So yeah, soundtrack matters, lettering matters. And what you guys were saying about that, and RA was talking about even sending, sketches and stuff. I don't draw, but Scott will use this as the lead-in for Sniper and Rook, if that's okay.
Yes, go for it.
A lot of the times when I work with artists, because I've been blessed to be able to work with some fantastic artists, and I don't want to name drop because it'll sound like I'm just name dropping. But like everybody that I've worked with, if anybody that I've worked with is watching, thank you for bringing the project to life. Thank you for putting your life and energy into it, because I can't draw my way out of a paper bag. I can't even draw what a paper bag looks like. So you will see a whole bunch of art. Scott, can I share my screen?
Go for it. Yep.
All right, cool. And I know we only have a couple minutes, so I will give everybody the quick version of the PowerPoint presentation here. Do you guys see just the main screen, Sniper and Rush, Beta 3? All right, so Beta 3 Comics is how I've been publishing for the last 20 years. It's now Beta 3 Studios. Since Beta 3 has worked with Silverline, universes are getting integrated. Sniper and Rook are two covert government operatives that work for the government directly underneath a general, and they do the missions that only they can or only they will be willing to do. So think action adventure, think spy, espionage. I heard the other day that the worst thing you can do is say, my book is like this, but for lack of time. If you like anything from Mission Impossible to the Bourne movies to TVs like humorous to a point, Chuck and Burn Notice, you'd find yourself right at home with Sniper and Rook.
I'm sold by the DeLorean.
Yep.
You know, undercover, don't draw attention, right? Yeah, Jack has a beautiful DeLorean. That is his car. That is his baby. You'll see there's a lot of 80s refs in here because they're very much both parts of me. She is definitely my smarter part. He is definitely my more dumb part. You know, impetuous, kind of jumping into things. She's the more analytical. So these I have always affectionately referred to as my first kids. The reason why I had them up first on the first page, not only because the DeLorean is awesome, but because I found myself more and more not writing the Sniper and Rook as characters, but as Jack and Rebecca as people who had their own individual personalities. So as we're going through, and I'm hoping, okay, I'll click on that and see if that'll bring up the next slide. My system's running slow. I apologize.
Okay.
That's why I left earlier. My system completely crashed. Here we go. So Sniper and Rook, very patriotic. The first story arc deals with the White House being taken captive, are being taken, basically infiltrated. President being taken captive. International hijinks ensue. That was their first mission. The picture on our left-hand side is from issue 11, which culminates a lot of stuff from multiple story arcs throughout the premiere issues. The first 5 issues are collected in the trade paperback collection, which will be available again on indieplanet.com. And issue 1 is available now under the Silverline banner on indieplanet.com. The full first 5 story issues tell the first story arc on their inaugural mission. It is a lot of fun. One of the things that was important is, like I said, you know, I show them in character, uniform out if they're covert. You know, that's why they have simple jackets and masks. You know, take the mask off, leather jacket, bam, you're on the street. Leonardo Gandam did the art here for the picture on the left. He is an artist who I'm going to be working on even more upcoming. I was very, very lucky to work with John Mallon years ago, who did a whole issue for me. And that is the cover for one of those. That is a future issue. I have a couple more storylines to wrap up before we can get there. One of the things that we know that it is important for heroes to have villains that match them. Again, John did this piece for me, Sniper and Rook versus Sight and Scope, which are essentially the anti-Sniper and Rook. Very much like a Spider-Man, where they have something shared in the past or in common. They do as well, but what is that? We don't quite know. Sight and scope, though, are very, very important to the Sniper and Nook mythology. And if you look behind me, they're even right here on the banner, which is a clearer picture here. And then to wrap up with the last full slide, I also know that any book also is essential to have important supporting characters. In the background there, we have a very mysterious character named Ripper, who has appeared and is coming back, gets his own limited series, hopefully coming out sometime next year. Anti-hero to a degree, hero to another degree, mystery to a large degree. And the last one, auctioneer mode here. When I designed Sniper and Rook, and so I showed you this stuff, right? I showed you, okay, they got guns and they got swords and they got military and they work for the government and all that stuff, and there's a general. And now, alien? What the heck's an alien doing here? I really designed Sniper and Rook the way I did because I wanted to be able to play in different genres of writing, and I wanted it to all make a lot of sense. So coming from the X-Files generation, it made a lot of sense. Mulder and Scully one day was working in, the whole mythology of, the cigarette smoking man and Alex Krychek and all of the espionage, but then they also had the monster of the week. And it made sense because they were government operatives. What does the government have their hands in? Everything. So where could Sniper and Rook find themselves in any specific issue? Anywhere, doing anything. So that's a brief overview of some of the wonders of the world of Sniper and Rook. I have a lot more coming out with Sniper and Rook and the greater shared Silverline universe of characters in 2021. It is going to be a most excellent year.
Thank you, John. And thank you, everybody. We are past the time. Hopefully they haven't cut us off. They haven't pulled the plug on our show here. All of our names are on our screens there for viewers. Take note of this. This, I assume, can be watched later. We would love for you to follow us all on our social media outlets and Facebooks and Instagrams and wherever we are. We are all independent creators working on projects here and there, and especially for Silverline to Comic Conway. Thank you for, like I said, letting us crash the party. Thank you for featuring us. Silverline has 3 shows. We have a Sunday night show. We have a Monday night one-on-one where Roland usually interviews one of our Silverline creatives. And then we have a Wednesday Wham show, which I'm the host of. And Mr. John Medic down there is almost always there. He's keeping the party alive.
We have a lot of
always
fun.
got a PowerPoint. Always got a PowerPoint.
He's the life of the party on Wednesday.
It's what I'm known for. Oh yeah.
We will be back here the next 2 Saturdays from 10 all the way through to 2, right? Central time. It is 3 o'clock on the East Coast right now. And we would love for you to join us. As always, please comment, ask questions, like, share, subscribe to all those good things. And we appreciate you supporting independent comics creators and supporting Comic Conway and their online digital convention. Have I missed anything, anybody?
No, you did great.
I think you're good.
Thank you all. So, it's been the custom today. We go 3, 2, 1. Make mine Silverline.
Fine.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.